Glass shattered somewhere down the hall and a woman screamed, but it wasn't the woman sleeping beside him. That's the sound that pulled Nathaniel Hale out of a dead sleep at 4 minutes past midnight, in a house with 14 bedrooms and not one person he could call in a real emergency. He sat up in the dark, heart slamming, and reached for the other side of the bed. Empty. Cold. The sheets barely disturbed. He grabbed a robe and moved toward the sound, telling himself it was nothing. A dropped vase, a startled cat, anything but what his gut was already warning him it might be. When he reached the east hallway, the chandelier above was throwing broken light across the marble floor, and in the middle of that light lay the shattered remains of an antique mirror that had hung there since his grandmother's time. Glass everywhere. And kneeling over it, dragging the limp body of a woman across the wreckage, was his fiancée Victoria Reyes, still in the black dress from a party that had ended hours ago. She looked up at him and smiled. "Relax, baby," she said, calm as anything. "I handled it." Nathaniel didn't move. He couldn't. His eyes went to the woman on the floor. Elena, the housekeeper who'd worked in his home for almost 3 years, quiet and steady, the kind of person who moved through a room so gently you forgot she was there until something needed doing and it was already done. He knew she took her coffee black. He knew she left fresh flowers on his late mother's desk every week without being asked. He did not know her last name. He didn't know if she had children. Standing there in the wreckage of a mirror that had outlived 3 generations of his family, he realized, with a shame that hit him harder than the cold marble under his bare feet, that he knew almost nothing real about her at all. "What did you do?" His voice came out smaller than he meant it to. Something cold and unfamiliar flickered behind Victoria's eyes, there and gone so fast he almost convinced himself he'd imagined it. Then the warmth came back, the same practiced warmth that had made him fall for her 2 years earlier at a charity gala, the warmth that made a stranger feel like the only person in the room. "She fell," Victoria said. "She'd been drinking. She came at me now. I was trying to get her somewhere safe before she hurt herself worse. It should have made sense. It didn't." Elena didn't drink. He'd watched her turn down champagne at a staff gathering once, polite but firm, saying it wasn't for her. And there was something in the way Victoria said "safe" that didn't match the way she'd been hauling Elena's body across broken glass, rough and rushed, like she was trying to move evidence before anyone saw it. Before he could ask anything else, Elena's eyes fluttered open. She looked past Victoria, straight at him, and with a voice barely above a whisper, thick with pain, she said 4 words that would haunt him for the rest of his life. "She knows about Marcus." Then her eyes closed again. Nathaniel didn't know who Marcus was. But he watched Victoria's face change, the warmth draining out of it in an instant, replaced by something sharp and calculating, and he understood, with a clarity that turned his stomach, that whatever was happening in his hallway at midnight was only the beginning. "Call an ambulance," he said. "Nail, wait." "Call an ambulance, Victoria." For the first time since he'd known her, Victoria Reyes looked afraid. The ambulance lights painted the marble entryway red and blue for almost 20 minutes before they finally left, carrying Elena to the hospital. Nathaniel drove behind them alone, knuckles white on the wheel, those 4 whispered words looping through his mind. "She knows about Marcus." Who was Marcus? Why would that name make his fiancée's face fall like a mask slipping? Victoria had wanted to come. He told her, in a voice he barely recognized as his own, to stay home. She hadn't argued, and that, more than anything, unsettled him. The Victoria he knew always had something to say. At the hospital, under fluorescent lights that felt too honest after the soft gold lamps of his house, Nathaniel sat in a plastic chair at 1:30 in the morning, still in his robe. For the first time in years, nobody recognized him as Nathaniel Hale, the philanthropist whose name showed up in society columns. He was just a man waiting for news about someone he realized, with a creeping, uncomfortable guilt, he had never really tried to know. A nurse came out around 2:30. Elena had a concussion, deep cuts from the glass, 2 fractured fingers where she must have tried to catch herself. She was stable, drifting in and out, disoriented, asking for someone. "She keeps saying Marcus," the nurse said. "We think it might be family. Do you know if she has anyone we should call?" Nathaniel realized he didn't even know if Elena had an emergency contact on file that wasn't the front desk of his own house. Something twisted in his chest. "I'll find out," he said. "Can I see her?" The nurse hesitated, then nodded, leading him down a quiet corridor to a small room where Elena lay propped against white pillows, a bandage wrapped around her forehead, and 4 taped to the back of her uninjured hand. She looked smaller here than she ever had in his house. Younger too, though he knew she was 31. He only knew that because it was on her employment file, a file he'd apparently never bothered to actually read until tonight. Her eyes opened when he walked in. "Mr. Hale," she said weakly. "You didn't have to come." "Yes, I did." He pulled a chair beside the bed and sat, feeling strangely nervous, like a man meeting a stranger for the first time, which in a way he was. "Elena. Who's Marcus?" Her jaw tightened. For a moment he thought she wouldn't answer. Then quietly, "My son. He's 6. Nathaniel blinked. "You have a son?" Her eyes filled and she looked away toward the dark parking lot beyond the window. "I never told anyone in your house. I couldn't. If Victoria found out I had a child and that his father is—" She stopped. "His father is what?" Elena closed her eyes. "It doesn't matter now." But it did matter, and Nathaniel could feel it the way you feel a storm coming before the sky changes color. Something connected his fiancée to the secret child of his housekeeper. Something dangerous enough that Victoria was willing to drag an unconscious woman across broken glass rather than let it come out. "Elena," he said gently, "I need you to tell me. I promise whatever it is you're safe now. I won't let anything happen to you or your son." She studied his face for a long moment, as if deciding whether 3 years of careful, silent distance had earned even an ounce of trust. Finally she took a shaking breath. "Marcus's father," she said, "is your brother?" The room seemed to tilt. Nathaniel had a brother, Daniel Hale, 3 years younger, presumed dead in a boating accident off the coast 6 years ago. A tragedy that had shattered what was left of their family, that had sent his mother into a decline that took her life 2 years later. A wound that had never fully closed. "That's not possible," Nathaniel said, his voice barely a whisper. "Daniel drowned." Elena looked at him with an expression he'd never forget, grief, guilt, and something almost like relief at finally being allowed to say the words out loud. "No," she said. "He didn't." The room went silent except for the steady beep of the monitor. "What do you mean he didn't drown?" Nathaniel's voice cracked on the last word. 6 years of mourning, of guilt, of standing in front of an empty grave because they'd never recovered a body. Everything seemed to crack open at once. Elena's hands trembled against the blanket. "Daniel faked the accident. He was in trouble, Mr. Hale, serious trouble. Money he owed people who don't forgive debts. He thought if everyone believed he was dead, they'd stop looking for him. The men he owed. Your family too. He didn't think about what it would do to your mother. To you. And you knew this the whole time? You knew my brother was alive and said nothing?" "I met him after," Elena said softly. 2 years after the accident. I was working a second job at a diner outside the city. He came in almost every night for a month before he told me who he really was. I didn't know about your family then. By the time I found out, I already loved him. Then Marcus came, and by that point I was too afraid to say anything because Daniel made me promise. He said if the truth ever came out, if certain people found out he was alive, it wouldn't just ruin his life, it would put Marcus in danger too. Where is he now? Where's Daniel? Elena's eyes filled again. He disappeared 8 months ago. Said it was getting too dangerous, that the men looking for him had gotten close. He told me to take Marcus and stay hidden, that he'd find a way back to us when it was safe. I haven't heard from him since. Her voice broke. I took the job at your house because I needed the money. And because some small, foolish part of me thought maybe being near his family would make me feel less alone. How does Victoria know about Daniel? He asked. Fear, real and raw, replaced the grief on Elena's face. She doesn't know Daniel. She knows the men who are after him. The floor seemed to drop out from under him. I found papers, Mr. Hale. In your office weeks ago when I was cleaning. Wire transfers. Names. I recognized the men your brother used to talk about, the ones he owed money to. Victoria's been sending them money. Large amounts? I didn't understand at first. I thought it was some kind of investment. But 3 days ago, one of those men called the house line by mistake asking for her. I heard enough to understand. She isn't paying them to protect Daniel. She's paying them to find him, to figure out exactly where he's hiding. Why would Victoria want to find Daniel? Elena looked at him with something close to pity, the kind reserved for someone whose entire world is about to be rearranged. Because if Daniel is legally alive, Mr. Hale, your father's will doesn't pass everything to you the way everyone assumes. Daniel is still the eldest son on paper. The accident was never officially confirmed. No body was ever found. There's a clause. I saw it in the documents your lawyer sent last month. If Daniel is proven alive within 7 years of the accident, the estate reverts to a split inheritance. 50% each. And whoever marries into that 50% before Daniel resurfaces controls half of everything permanently, Nathaniel finished slowly, the pieces sliding into place like a blade. Even if Daniel comes back after. Elena nodded. She isn't trying to protect your family, Mr. Hale. She's trying to make sure Daniel never comes back to claim what's his. And tonight, when I confronted her, when I told her I knew what she was doing and I wasn't staying quiet, she panicked. She grabbed me. I hit the mirror trying to get away. Nathaniel sat there under the harsh hospital light, looking at a woman who had spent 3 years quietly serving his coffee, dusting his mother's photographs, carrying a secret that could have destroyed her while also carrying the truth that might save what was left of his family. Elena, he said, his voice steady now, decided in a way it hadn't been an hour ago. I need your help finding my brother. And I promise you I'm going to fix all of this. He didn't sleep that night or the next. He returned to the house at dawn and found Victoria sitting exactly where he'd left her, still in her dress. She looked up when he entered, and for a moment he almost let himself believe the version of her he'd fallen for, the warmth, the softness. How is she? Victoria asked, and her voice trembled in a way that, 24 hours earlier, would have sent him rushing to comfort her. Alive? Nathaniel said flatly. No thanks to you. Nell, I told you what happened. She attacked me. I panicked. Stop. The word came out harder than he meant it to, and Victoria flinched. I know about Daniel. I know about the payments. I know what you've been trying to do. Silence? The kind that lasts a second too long and tells you everything. I don't know what you're talking about, Victoria said, but the softness was gone from her voice. Elena found the wire transfers, Victoria. The men you've been paying. I know about the inheritance clause. I know you've been hunting for my brother before he could come back and claim what's his. And I know you were willing to marry me just to lock it all down before that happened. Victoria's mask dropped completely, and what was underneath was colder than anything Nathaniel had ever seen. You think I did this for money? She laughed, dry and humorless. You have no idea what it's like, Nail. Growing up with nothing, watching people like you pretend hard work is the reason you have everything. I fell in love with a life. Is that such a crime? You assaulted a woman in my home and left her bleeding on the floor. You've been secretly funding men hunting my brother, men who could kill him if they find him first. That's not ambition, Victoria. That's monstrous. He shouldn't even be alive, Victoria snapped, the truth finally coming out unfiltered. The estate was supposed to be yours. I just made sure it stayed that way. Nathaniel stood there in the house his grandmother built, surrounded by the wreckage of a life he thought he understood, and felt something inside him settle into a strange, clear calm. The engagement is over, he said. You have until the end of the day to get your things out of this house. If I ever find out you've contacted those men again or gone near Elena or her son, I will personally make sure the police know everything I know. Victoria didn't argue. She simply gathered herself, stood, and walked past him toward the stairs without another word. The search took 11 days. 11 days during which Nathaniel visited Elena at the hospital every morning before work and every night after, not because he had to, but because he discovered, to his own surprise, that he wanted to. He learned her full name was Elena Josefina Vasquez, that she'd grown up in a small town in Ohio, the daughter of a single mother who worked 3 jobs to keep the lights on, and that Elena had promised herself, even as a little girl, that she'd never let her own child grow up feeling forgotten the way she sometimes had. He learned that Marcus, his nephew, loved dinosaurs, hated peas, and had memorized every planet in the solar system by age 5. On the 11th day the investigator called. We found him, the man said. Small town outside Boise. Working construction under a different name. He looks worn down, Nathaniel, like a man who's been running a long time. Nathaniel flew out that same afternoon, alone, his heart pounding harder with every mile. He found Daniel in the parking lot of a hardware store, older than he remembered, a beard covering half his face, a cap pulled low. For a long moment, the two brothers just stood there, staring at each other across 6 years of grief and silence. Nail, Daniel finally whispered, his voice breaking. I'm sorry. They embraced right there on the gravel, both of them crying openly. 6 years of mourning finally allowed to become something else. Relief, disbelief, the strange grief of realizing you'd spent years honoring a death that never happened. It took another hour of conversation. Daniel explaining the debts, the fear, the shame that kept him running long after the original danger had passed, before he finally agreed to come home. The men he owed had already been quietly paid off days earlier, the moment Nathaniel learned the truth. In the end, there was nothing left to run from except his own guilt. Elena was discharged from the hospital that same week, her hands still bandaged, a thin scar forming above her eyebrow that would fade with time but never fully disappear. At Nathaniel's insistence, she moved into the guest wing of the Hale estate, where Marcus could finally meet the family his mother had kept him separated from his whole life. The reunion between Daniel and Marcus happened in the garden, under the late afternoon sun. Nathaniel watched from a distance as his brother knelt in front of a boy who looked so much like him it was almost startling, the same stubborn cowlick, the same crooked smile. "Are you really my dad?" Marcus asked, his voice small and uncertain. "I really am," Daniel said, his voice thick. "I'm sorry it took me so long to tell you." Marcus studied him the way only children can, measuring the whole truth of a person in a single look. Then he threw his arms around his father's neck, and Daniel broke down, sobbing into his son's shoulder. 6 years of hiding finally allowed to dissolve into something like healing. A year later, on a quiet evening on that same garden bench, Nathaniel found Elena watching the sunset. "Can I ask you something?" he said, sitting beside her. "That night, when you were on the floor bleeding, barely conscious, the first thing you did was warn me. Not save yourself. Not run. You told me the truth about Marcus, knowing it could destroy everything you'd built to protect him. Why?" Elena considered the question for a long moment. "Because some secrets aren't worth protecting anymore once protecting them starts hurting the people you love," she said. "I was so afraid for so long of what the truth would cost me that I never stopped to think about what the silence was costing everyone else. Costing you. Costing your brother. Costing my own son who deserved to know his father." Nathaniel nodded slowly. "I think about it a lot," he admitted. "How close I came to marrying someone who would have destroyed this family, and how the person who actually saved it was someone I barely knew existed." "You know me now," Elena said softly. "I do." He smiled, something warm and unguarded crossing his face for the first time in longer than he could remember. "And I'd like to keep getting to know you if you'll let me." 2 years passed. The mansion that once felt cold and cavernous to Nathaniel now echoed with a different kind of noise. Marcus's footsteps running down the hallway where the broken glass once lay, Daniel's laughter from the workshop he'd built in the garage, restoring old furniture with his own hands. Elena had gone back to school, something she'd once thought impossible, and was 2 semesters from finishing her nursing degree, inspired, she said, by the kindness of the nurses who'd cared for her that terrible night. Nathaniel proposed in the same garden where Daniel and Marcus had first reunited. No spectacle, no cameras, just the 2 of them, and Marcus hiding in the bushes, unable to contain his excitement at having been asked months earlier to be the ring bearer. Elena said yes before he even finished the question. "What would you have done in her place? Stayed silent to protect yourself, or told the truth even bleeding on the floor?" If this story moved you tonight, I'd be grateful if you'd like it. Leave a comment telling me where you're watching from, and share it with someone who needs a reminder that quiet loyalty always matters more than it seems. Thanks for staying with me to the end. I'll see you in the next one.